Howdy doody, old sport. You're tuned in to the Wisecracking bad boys, Fitz
and Gerald.
Fitz and Gerald. Fitz and Gerald. Fitz and Gerald. Fitz and Gerald. Fitz and Gerald. Fitz and Gerald. They're the Wisecracking bad boys. That's so bad.
Today, we're going to do a deep dive into The Great Gatsby's key theme of class. Yay! The Great Gatsby is a timeless piece of literature taking place in the Roaring '20s. It explores the lies and deceit and the falsified promises of the American dream.
Did you know, Gerald? It was published on the 10th of April, 1925. This was a time of major pivots in society's attitude and a considerable change in the political landscape. This was smack bang in the middle of the Jazz Age, so I guess it makes sense to say, not only was the music swinging, so were people's opinions.
Ain't that right? Wow, what an amazing little factoid. Thank you, Fitz, for that mind-bending information. Now, F. Scott Fitzgerald highlights the inequality of the class system and the concepts of prestigious old money versus ambitious new money.
I agree, indubitably. In Fitzgerald's novel, James Gatz, aka Gatsby, was raised by poor farmers in rural North Dakota. Gatsby, hating this life, he chose to pursue a life of money and deceit. Once he had achieved this American dream, Gatsby's name became riddled with lies as people made up stories to explain his enormous wealth.
Yeah, even at his own party, people would openly deface his name behind his back, saying, "Somebody told me they thought he killed a man once, and he was a German spy during the war." And I even heard one fella say, well, they say Gatsby is a nephew or cousin of Kaiser Wilhelm's. That's where all this money comes from.
This tells us that the people created a facade for Gatsby to explain his enormous wealth, not accepting his new money.
The upper class versus lower class idea is a key point of scrutiny in Fitzgerald's novel.
Hey, he stole our name.
By golly, Fitz and Gerald.
Fitzgerald!
What an amazing bit of trivia.
You can say that again.
Now, where was I before you enlightened me to that hilarious predicament?
Something about soup and tea?
Silly Fitz. Scrutiny! This idea of upper class in Fitzgerald's novel is heavily scrutinized as Fitzgerald enlightens the reader into his own experiences with the upper class. After his first successful novel, This Side of Paradise, Fitzgerald was accepted into a life of money and privilege. Fitzgerald's experiences with his wife were similar to that of Thomas Buchanan's, where he wanted his wife Zelda purely so that no one else could have her.
Yes, I heard that he once said, "I wouldn't care if Zelda died, but I wouldn't want anyone else to have her."
Clearly, Fitzgerald is drawing on his own experiences and personal anecdotes of him rubbing shoulders with the high and mighty, in order to make a more successful critique of the upper class, painting them as selfish, highbrow elitists with nothing better to do than sit around at dull tea parties or have pillow fights with each other.
There is certainly some irony in the fact that at the time of writing the book, Fitzgerald was certainly no working class man himself. He definitely had complex feelings towards the whole concept of class, simultaneously disgusted, yet also enthralled by it.
Wow, that's very true. In that way, Fitzgerald can be clearly likened to Nick Carraway, being appalled by the actions of the rich, but also unable to resist the temptation of becoming swept into madness and enjoying the fruits of a lavish, materialistic lifestyle.
Absolutely. Another instance of the author portraying the wealthy as immoral and hedonistic is that Fitzgerald puts emphasis on the idea that Tom doesn't care for his mistress Myrtle. In the novel, Myrtle is brutally killed, but Tom only cares for his own reputation, being quick to shift the blame off of him. That yellow car I was driving this afternoon wasn't mine. But more on that later, old sport.
Ha ha ha. Thank you, Fitz. To add to that, Fitzgerald, through the voice of Nick, describes Daisy and Tom's relationship by making a key point about how Nick felt the thing for Daisy to do was to rush out of the house, child in arms.
Why would he say that, Gerald?
Well, Nick viewed Tom as a person who could never be happy with what he had, and that Tom would drift on forever, seeking more of the thrill of the dramatic turbulence of some irrecoverable football game.
Well, it seems to me that Fitzgerald is using the turbulence of some irrecoverable football game as a means of saying Tom was constantly seeking a more intoxicating and enchanting lifestyle.
That's exactly right. Fitzgerald uses the idea of Tom and polysyndeton's to describe how those of old money were constantly needing more. More parties, more wealth, and more partners. Just like poor Myrtle.
Yes, Fitzgerald describes Tom to have two shining, arrogant eyes.
Yes, indeedy. Did you know, on a similar note, Fitzgerald attempts to reveal how actions and ignorance from upper-class society in his novel lead to brutality.
That is thought-provoking, to say the least, Gerald. I guess it makes sense when you consider that Fitzgerald utilizes this idea of old money and new money to effectively debunk the 1920s American dream, leaving it as an unattainable object. When reading through a Marxist lens, it's clear to see that the characters who choose to pursue new money and their American dreams are annihilated in brutal, violent, and bloody ends.
Hey, that's exactly what happened to Myrtle, right?
Unfortunately so. You see, Myrtle's life gets violently extinguished by the privileged and bourgeois woman, Daisy Buchanan, who is the ultimate embodiment of high society.
Yeesh, that doesn't sound fun. Talk about a fender bender.
You're right, Gerald. It doesn't sound like fun to be at the expense of the wealthy and powerful, suffering the consequences of their chaotic and reckless actions, being treated as disposable, just another commodity, while the upper class gets away with doing whatever they please. And this is exactly what Fitzgerald wants his readers to realise by utilising a grotesque description of Myrtle's death. Fitzgerald is getting his point across that with gross amounts of wealth comes negligence, and with negligence comes tragedy. Myrtle was stuck, forever chasing the promised American dream, meeting her demise because of the despicable attitudes like materialism and greed that are prominent in the filthy rich.
It's okay, Fitz. Gone, but not forgotten. So you're saying that Myrtle was killed because of her want to pursue the American dream?
Yes, old sport. Her thick, dark blood was left with the dust of the car, and her left breast swung loose like a flap.
Ouch. Bad day for a midnight stroll.
No freedom when you're living in the Valley of Ashes.
I would not feel any freedom with those harrowing and utterly disturbing eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg staring straight through me. He gives me the heebie-jeebies.
Absolutely haunting.
To add to that point of brutality, Fitzgerald's decision of making Gatsby's violent death in the pool in his house is quite symbolic. Due to Gatsby's flamboyant and careless lifestyle, his house address would have been quite public information, accessible by any person. This brings the reader to come to the conclusion that Gatsby's wealth and new money ideologies brought his eventual downfall.
Wow. That reminds me of some recent commotion in the ocean with the infamous Diddy parties.
You're exactly right, Fitz. Diddy's giant parties were his downfall. Of course, Gatsby's death was due to extremely different circumstances.
But there are certainly similarities.
Yes, on the other side of the spectrum, Tom's old money parties were very enclosed and not broadcasted freely as Gatsby's.
Yeah, and let's be real, Tom's parties were much more of a Diddy party. Tom literally breaks Myrtle's nose at his party, acting instantaneously, showing his violent tendencies and disregard for those he sees as lesser than him. Yet another instance where Fitzgerald depicts those with old money as cruel and abhorrent. And it's clear that his argument has validity, with cases of the wealthy still acting on their inhuman instincts, even 99 years after the publishing of the novel.
Very true. Now back to Gatsby's brutal death. The symbolism of the pool in The Great Gatsby reflects Gatsby's wealth and dreams, things he never got to truly enjoy. In his parties, people never really knew Gatsby because he never actually enjoyed his parties. He lets others enjoy it for him. This is because his parties are a facade to hide himself. Much like the brilliant gardens and enough coloured lights to make a Christmas tree, the pool is a facade only used for the first time in his death.
Wow, I think I get it. As stated in the earlier comment, Fitzgerald discards this idea of the American dream in the 20s and new money being possible.
That's right. As soon as Gatsby decides to enjoy his life and relax in the pool, the dream falls apart and he is murdered.
I'd fall apart too if I had a bullet in the head.
How come? There's nothing up there that needs protecting.
Ah!
Well, it looks like our time together has come to an end. You've been tuned into the Wisecracking Bad Boys,
Fitz,
and Gerald.
it has been a great episode, and I'd love to conclude with one last tidbit.
Go ahead.
Say, Gerald, have you heard about Jay Gatsby's car? It was a real hit with the ladies. Start spreading the news. I'm leaving today. I wanna be a part of it. New York, New York. Wait, is that Jay-Z? In New York, concrete jungle where dreams are made of. There's nothing you can't do. Now you're in New York. These beats will make you feel brand new. The lights will inspire you. Let's hear it for New York, New York, New York.